Hey there, Marty and Ashley. How you doing? First of all, I just once again wanted to tell you how sorry I was that things worked out the way they did last night. Uh, I wanted to give the speech. Uh, my mom, while we were while they were letting people stand up and do their like little bitty speeches, my mom was pushing for me to hop up, and I thought about doing it, and I actually almost did. But even when I did that, they moved on. But it wouldn't have done my speech justice anyhow, and I really didn't know how to condense what I was going to say. I what I'd written was pretty long, longer than I even intended it to be. So even if I'd got up there in front of everybody, Jimmy might have cut me off. Who knows? He was pushing people to keep it quick. But anyhow, it works out all right this way, anyways, because I didn't know a lot of people there. They sure didn't know me, and the only people I was talking to were you two, anyhow. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about Brian as a youth, because that's of course the only way that me, Andy, and Ruth knew him. But yeah, I just wanted to focus on some of that. But and talk about childhood in Norton. I feel like we were pretty lucky growing up, so close to the park, and we had so many people who lived near the park, or their parents would let them ride their bikes to the park and trust them to come home. A lot of times, parents were trusting us a little too much. I don't think they quite knew all the stuff that we maybe have gotten into. I won't get us in trouble or anything, but we weren't always good. But anyway, I mean, Brian and Ashley both, especially Brian, really for me and Andy, were a huge was a huge part of our childhood, along with that house that you guys used to live in across from the park and the park itself. But anyway, I'll just talk a little bit about Brian. But I mean, what I really remember about Brian as a youth, and judging from the speeches that people were giving last night, he still retained a lot of the qualities that I liked about him when he was a kid. Um, he was just kind. As much of a cliche as that is, you always hear people saying stuff like that, like he was so good. But in Brian's case, it was definitely true. I was talking to my mom about, and I asked Andy about it too. It was like, do you guys remember, or am I just crazy, the way that Brian walked? Like, just his walk, he had this bounce in his step. I was actually going to try to demonstrate it during the speech, but I figured probably not a good idea. Just end up making a fool of myself. But you guys might know what I'm talking about. But everyone I talked to also agreed that he did have kind of this bounce to his step, and it kind of matched the inner Brian as well. Like he looked and acted, like he was just a positive, kind, caring dude, a funny guy, always up to have fun, always down to have some fun. But his walk reflected that. I know that sounds kind of funny to say, but anyway, uh, he was kind. But I remember one time that he was actually trying to be a little bit nasty, and it didn't work out so well because he was just so inherently nice that I don't think he had the capabilities of being mean. But one time, it was either Andy or I won. I don't even remember which, but one of us was getting picked on over at that little practice tennis court behind the big tennis court. Somebody was making us eat dirt, or eat a worm, or chew some gum off the ground, or something like that. But while it was happening, Brian, I guess he came up on it, and he wanted to do something about it. He saw that we were struggling, whatever, and the guys were like 5 or 6 years older than him. They were a few years older than me and Andy, so they had to be a lot older than Brian. But he called him out. He was talking to Josh Lovell. Actually, I wasn't going to mention the name at the funeral home, but it was Josh Lovell. But he hollered at him, and this was around the time when I Can't Believe It's Not Butter came out, and they were having the marketing. Their marketing scheme, it was like Fabio on TV, if you remember that, like the Austrian with the golden locks and the big huge muscles, all that disgusting stuff. But that was the big joke running around. So Brian I don't know. I guess he just didn't know what else to say, but he looks at Level and he yells at him. He's like mad, and he says, "Your teeth are so yellow that I can't believe it's not butter." And I mean, you could tell that he was really mad, and he meant it to be this scathing attack, but nobody involved really saw it that way. But it scared him enough that he had spoken up against those guys that he ran directly home. And I guess me and Andy had to continue eating their dirt or whatever, swallow the worm. Who knows what happened? But so Brian ran to the house. But that brings me to the house itself. You know, that place, even to this day, walking down the road, seeing that place. Every time I take my kids to the park, go trick or treating, drive by, whatever, I always see that house. And even over the years that we haven't really spoken to Brian, I've always thought about him. And all the stuff that we used to do there. Lord, we did everything. I remember the basketball goal out beside, right next to the house on the little patio section. But spending all kinds of time out there. I remember I was gonna blame Ashley for an Ace of Base party that we had out there one time. Somebody was blasting Ace of Base, and I just assumed it was Ashley, but Andy went and told me that that was not true. That it was actually Amber Lawson, the girl that lived next door. But so I'm glad I didn't call you out, Ashley. That wasn't your fault. He said you were more into TLC. I don't know if that's true. Uh, Almost as bad. But anyway, yeah, I remember that house, and I always think of all the times we spent there. And what stands out the most is the sledding that we used to do over there. Like, that was a community-wide thing that every kid in the neighborhood looked forward to. Every time it would snow, every Christmas break, stuff like that. We knew that if a good snow fell, that we could get bundled up by our moms, looking like Randy from A Christmas Story. But it was worth it because we got to go out there and spend the day sledding with all our friends. And of course, Brian was always there. But I remember he would always want to act or do the same things that the big kids were doing. And I remember one time somebody, I don't know who it was, but they brought these humongous inner tubes out there, and they were blown up, and we were going to slide down the hill on them. And Brian and a bunch of other people had built a ramp at the bottom of the hill, and we were going to hit it, of course, and fly out of there. So everybody was doing. A lot of people were having trouble holding on, but Brian, who was a lot smaller than the rest of us, even he wanted to have a go. We all knew it was going to end badly, but he wanted to do it anyhow. So being kids, we let him. Not the smartest decision. But I remember he starts flying down this hill and he hits the bottom of that ramp. And then as he does, he kind of like, it hits the ramp and he kind of bounces into it, and immediately it jumps up and just flings him up into the air. And he flies, a good 15 feet into the air and crashes down. So we're all scared to death and we run down the hill. And by the time we get down, he just popped right back up. And he seemed fine, but you could tell he was hurt. Probably just knocked the wind out of him, which if you ever had that happen to you, it's a terrible feeling. But yeah, so he tried to play it cool like he wasn't hurt. Everybody knew different, but we didn't give him any guff about it. But so he hung around for a few more minutes until he felt comfortable making an excuse, so we wouldn't think that he was hurt. So he said, he was tired or had to go in and get something to eat or who knows. But he probably went in the house and Marty probably patted on him or who knows what. But, we always knew he was going to be back out the next day to do it all again. But he just wanted to hang out with the big dudes and do what they were doing. But I mean, those are just a couple of stories that I remember about Brian. Just a couple of things that stand out most in my mind. But like I said, I've thought about him a lot over the years, and I hate that we lost contact. I really don't even know how it happened. But I mean, I remember that when you guys moved away after that, a couple of times we'd be at Ashley's ball games or something. We'd be playing a basketball game at the same place she was or something, and he would be there. And I remember seeing him. It was just like old times. You know, we still knew each other. It wasn't weird. But even after that, over the years, we lost contact. We went to Powell Valley. We lost contact with all of our Norton friends for a long time there. And everybody just starts hanging out in their own social circles, and people start going to school and having kids and working and everything else. And it's just the way it works out. But uh, I don't know if it's any consolation, but what I think is kind of cool, if anything positive came out of us losing contact, is that in the hearts and minds of at least the Greer children, and I'm sure a lot of the other kids in the neighborhood who remember all the stuff going on at the park and at y'all's old house out there, Brian will always be that little mop haired kid who lived across the park that we shared so many good times with. That kind of comforts me a little bit. I don't know. I mean, of course, you guys are closer to it than me, and I don't know how you're dealing with it. And I'm terribly sorry that something as bad as this had to happen to you guys. But uh, I'm glad that he can live on as a little kid in someone's memory. And that's the only way we ever knew him. And we always loved Brian, and we always will love Brian, and that he'll always hold a special place in our hearts. And every time we go to that park, we'll be thinking of him and thinking of you guys. But I just wanted to make sure you guys kind of got a little bit of what I wanted to say. It was definitely a less formal version what you're getting here. I just wanted to talk to you. I was kind of nervous to do it in front of all those other people anyhow. But anyhow, I hope you guys are doing okay. Sorry I couldn't make it out to the burial today. I got the kids. The girls had art class and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to make some time to do this and let you guys know that Brian was loved and that he will be remembered, even if it is just as that little kid that we grew up with. But okay, you guys have a good night. See you later.